G'day folks, Dinesh here, and I have an interesting topic today. I'm going to talk about the nature of perception and nature of reality. So if we look at perception, we perceive everything in the physical reality through the five senses. And we interpret in our mind, and that's how we experience the physical world. But let's take sight, for example. When we look at an object or everything around us, it's the light reflecting back into our eyes, and then we interpret what we are seeing. But what we're seeing is in the past, because by the time the light reflects back in our eyes, we're looking at something in the past, okay? And this applies to all the other senses. Every time we touch something, and as soon as we get the interpretation, the signal going through the nerves, and then we interpret in our brain, it's already happened. So we're sensing something in the past. So, which is interesting because if we look at all the different aspects of our perception, from the physical senses, from the interpretation of our mind, and also our identity. Our identity is a collective sum of our experience in our life, and that's what forms our identity. And again, that's from the past. So it's fair to say that what we're perceiving and experiencing is the past. So what's the point of looking at this? Well, if we're constantly experiencing something in the past and never in the present moment, our perception is delusional, which is an interesting way to look at it, because we're not looking at anything in the present moment. We're always receiving information that's from the past. So that's one aspect of perception, from a subjective experience. So when we look at this from an objective perspective, they say matter isn't touching each other. There's an interaction happening with an electromagnetic field around it. So essentially what that means is, when I bring my hands close together like this, I can clearly feel that my hands are touching. But in reality, when we go to an atomic level, there's an electromagnetic field around each atom that's repelling my hand away, and it's never in contact. You can't perceive it with the naked eye, but in reality, that's what's happening. I'm actually not touching my hand. So if that's the case, but our perception is that we're touching it, all we're feeling is the repulsion, and that's signaling into our brain, and we interpret as whatever it is that we are sensing. And again, there, our perception is delusional, because we're not actually touching an object. So this is very hard for us to comprehend on an intellectual level, because that's not our subjective experience. So again, perception is deceiving us. So if that's the nature of perception, how can you trust your perception? How can you trust your perceiving reality? So this is where the concept of release comes in, and the concept of no view comes in. So no view basically is you're releasing on any sort of attachment or an aversion that you're creating with the interpretation of your experience in the external world. So what that essentially means is you're not coming to hard conclusions of what reality is, because everything that you're perceiving is not based on reality. It's only partial reality, right? So when we adopt this no view, then it leaves us open to experience more of reality. So let's look at this from a practical level. So when we start to release our physical senses, then we start to experience something that's outside of the physical matter. Okay, so let's look at how we sense energy. So we are conscious of our physical body, let's say our hands, and then we release our perception of the physical touch and expand our mind into the space around it. Then you start to sense energy, the electromagnetic field around the hands. That perception only happened because you were able to release your perception of your physical consciousness, right? And this is how you go up the vibrational scale. You keep releasing whatever your mind touches, you keep releasing whatever you perceive to be real, then you get a higher perception of reality. But even when you do that, it's still perception. So there's still an aspect of delusion around it, even if you're perceiving something higher. So this is an ongoing cycle where you're constantly in release to get a bigger picture every time, and you get a higher perception of reality. So what's the point of doing this? Well, when you're able to perceive from a higher reality, then you have more information. When you have more information, you basically have more tools to create the reality you want, right? So the other aspect is you're able to change your personality and your identity according to what you want. So the way we perceive our identity is the collective sum experience in our lifetime. And from all the attachments and aversions that we've created, we have strong viewpoints and opinions based on that collective experience, and that creates and forms our identity. But if we're able to release that, then you're able to see a different identity, a different nature of what you are. So essentially, this is a way to understand your true nature. And this is what they refer to as the spirit. I can't describe what the spirit is because it's a subjective experience. But the method I can describe, which is release. Release whatever your mind touches, release whatever perception you have of your identity, then you get to perceive a higher form or your true nature, right? And you keep doing this until you realize that you're part of the universal mind. And that can only be described at that level. You have to go through the process to have a subjective experience on that. Until someone does an experiment where they get a group of people, say 100 people, they go through the same process, and if they all come to a similar conclusion, then we can start talking about what the spirit is. But until then, we can only talk about the process on how to perceive it. So that's one aspect. So if we're able to change our perception of our reality and we're able to change the perception of our identity, then we can change a lot of different things around us. We can create the environment that we want, and we can become the person we aspire to be, right? And it's done through release. So let's talk about this concept of release. So release is basically an alchemical substance. In the Tao systems, they call it Song. And it's a substance that you can feel, just like how you can feel electromagnetic energy around you, the life force, when you pay attention to it. So the easiest way to feel this is one of my friends on the path taught me this, Harley, shout out to you. And it's basically, if you clench a fist as tight as you can, putting all your will into it, observe what's happening. Your mind will contract around the fist. You'll have a slight tunnel vision around the fist, and all your energy goes there, right? And then you suddenly release it, and you pay attention to what happens. There's a wave of relaxation that comes out of you. Like you feel it as a wave outside of your body, if you pay attention to it. And this is the initial access to the substance of Song, or release. So this is an alchemical substance which allows you to transform your perception on the vibrational scale. So you're going from one layer to the other. So the first layer you become conscious of is the electromagnetic layer. So life force. So when you can pay attention to it and you can perceive it, then you can influence it. So this is where consciousness comes in. So because we're only conscious of the physical body, we can only manipulate the physical reality. But if we're conscious of a higher form of reality, let's say electromagnetic energy, we can start influencing that as well because we're conscious of it. And this is where if you pay attention to that energy and you can start to influence it, then you can change the reality of the physical world, right? And this is what they refer to as magic. But there's a causation chain on why that happens. And it's about how much you're able to pay attention to it and how much you're able to identify with it and how much clarity of intent you develop, which determines how much you can influence it. And this is done through practice. And with that practice, it's just knowledge. It's just intellectual property. But this understanding has to come through practice. And you're constantly refining the process on building the clarity of intent, building your awareness of and sensitivity to the energy itself, and paying attention to all the principles that actually make all this happen, right? If you're able to do this, then you have a process on how you can change the reality of the physical experience that you're having, and you can change the reality of the identity of who you think you are and understand your true nature. Okay? Hope that video helps to understand the nature of perception and the nature of reality. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Thank you. See you next video.